Okay, so we're on the recording industry, back on the discs here, Berliner and his new disc that was not on a cylinder. This allowed mass production of records by stamping them into a hard rubber material. You can't really, it's kind of difficult to stamp a cylinder. I mean, it can be done, but this was so much easier. Berliner's disc recorder was the Victor Talking Machine Company. I'm sorry, the Victor Talking Machine Company also launched, and they were very successful with the gramophone. You would put a disc on a platen and put a needle in one of the grooves. This was really, truly the beginning of records. As I grew up knowing them, you don't use them today, but for many, many years, for decades, we used records. We didn't know anything about CDs or any other kind of taping mechanism like that. Um, and I want to go back to what I was saying about built-in obsolescence. It's not just to get us to do something different or to buy something different. It was almost to force us in a way by changing it. I mean, if you want to, uh, I often have people come over here and say, "Oh, I forgot my charger for my phone. Do you have one?" Well, yeah, sure, I got lots of them, but they're not going to fit that person's phone because they fit my phone only. And this is all for money. I just want you to realize that this is all built in, not just to change your habits, but to make money. Of course, that's the bottom line everywhere. But don't forget about the Victor Talking Machine Company. Then I think later on became Victor Records and that sort of thing. Um, so then we get more into these wax and shellac discs. Cylinder records competed with the flat discs. Um, for a number of years, but by the time the First World War, the disc record had become the standard. This is like Sony and PC. I'm sorry, Sony and the Sony Betamax and the other recording devices, videotape recorders. Sony lost out. You've got market share for Apple computers versus IBM/PC. Um, Apple lost out. Certainly not on the money end of it, but they lost out in market share. Um, it just became so proprietary. Everything you had to be an Apple product or it didn't work. And they really didn't care. It ended up at the point where Apple had 5% of the market, and Bill Gates' product had 95%. Now, most people would tell you that the Apple product is far superior. And this is what usually happens. The product that is less good, less high in quality, but cheaper, usually wins the day in the marketplace. People will do without some of the bells and whistles so that they can save money. And that's what happened. Um, but we're not going to cry a tear for Apple. They probably are one of the wealthiest companies in the world. So now as we talk about supply and demand, which is important in every industry, by 1914, record players and collections spurred a national boom in sales. The trend runs hot through the 1920s. Oh yes, record players were big, big, big. Um, you've got all kinds of stuff going on between the beginning of 1900 and the 1920s. You've got the flapper girls in the 1920s and the dance clubs and the dance halls, and this was just big stuff. That also crossed through the period of prohibition where people weren't allowed to drink alcohol. Actually, I should say that in a different way. They weren't allowed to purchase alcohol out in the open. They could drink it if they could find it. And then we had what we called the speakeasy. This was a place where if you knew the special knock on the door, or if you knew somehow how to get in, you could get in and purchase your liquor and that sort of thing, and nobody would bother you. And of course, they would be using the record player to play the music. Until 1925, all records were made by performing into a horn. This was that big thing, and you would perform into it. It limited the range and the type of music. It's hard to get a tuba right up close to a horn and then still hear other instruments. The tuba kind of takes over. So the idea of using an electrical signal from a microphone to drive an electromagnetic disc recording device was developed. Like I said, I'm just in awe of the ideas that people come up with, but electromagnetic recording was it, and that took over. Continuing along that theme, in 1925, the first electrically recorded discs and orthophonic phonographs went on sale using the Western electric system developed by AT&T's Bell Labs over the previous 10 years. It is now possible in 1925 to record whole orchestras and symphonies and even sound motion pictures. As I was saying, you cannot get all the instruments of an orchestra to make their music into one bell and therefore record that. You have to have a different kind of system to collect all of that sound, and that's what they came up with. So then we move on to 24, and I'll make this, no, I'll leave it right here. I went on a little longer than I thought I was going to. So we'll stop with slide 23 here.